I'm Michelle Anderson, founder of Clarinet Mentors. Welcome to another free video designed to help you play the clarinet more easily. I'm calling today's video High Notes 101. This means for those of you who are just starting to venture into the high register and you really want some tools to make it easier, this will help you out. Now, if you're a slightly more advanced player and you really want some fine-tuning on the upper end of the high register or into the altissimo, then I suggest you look for my High Notes 101 Part 2 or Part 3, or even the How to Play High Notes Part 2 and 3. They're great videos, they're just older technology. If you're relatively new to high notes, what I will say is it can be one of the more frustrating aspects of playing clarinet. A lot of times people try playing in the high register and they find the notes just don't come out very easily, or they squeak, or they don't sound good, all sorts of things like that. Well, I've been a professional player and teacher for over 30 years, and I've time and time again seen people deal with about 4 or 5 common problems or challenges, and once they recognize these problems and they know how to fix them, the high notes become much, much easier. So the good news for you is, by the time you watch this video, you might recognize what's not quite working well for you, and you will know how to fix it. And my guess is you're going to start sounding better almost instantly. So as I'm talking about how to play these high notes, I'm really going to start by telling you the 4 most common barriers or challenges we have to making those notes work well. So the first one is that you may not have a reed that is appropriate for the high register. And I'll tell you what I mean by that. Of course, everyone has a reed to play clarinet, and generally when you're a total beginner, you'll start on a relatively low number, maybe a 1.5 or a 2. And that low number simply means the tip of it is quite thin, although they're all quite thin, but that it's very easy to blow. It doesn't offer much resistance. So when we're new to the instrument and we don't really know how to blow with fast air and how to use our mouth muscles properly, which we call the embouchure on clarinet, it's still easy to get going. The challenge is the high notes really do require more air and more support, and that's really easy for us to do once we know how to do it and we train our body to do it. But if you're on a 1.5 reed, even a 2, sometimes it's a little bit too wimpy for those high notes to work properly. So every piece of equipment does work a bit differently. Some mouthpieces need stiffer reeds than others, but I can give you some indications so that you might be able to figure out whether or not you're playing on the proper reed strength. As a very general guideline, once you start playing in what we call above the break, that means any note using this register key to go into the higher register, I think you need at least a 2 to make it play well. And in many cases, I would say at least a 2.5. So that's a general guideline for you. If your reed is too soft, you might be squeaking a lot, although there are other causes to squeaks, but these are just some things for you to look for. You'll find that when you are playing the high notes, you get a very loud, unfocused, almost a squawky sound. And really the dead giveaway is that as you're trying to work your way up into higher notes, they wimp out completely and you get this very low sound. I call it an undertone. I'm going to play for you and demonstrate what that might sound like, just to give you an idea. So I'll work my way up, and then I'm going to imitate what a soft reed would sound like and how it wouldn't work. There we go. I'm trying to play. I'm putting all my effort into it. And instead of hearing a high note, I just get this weird low buzz. I'm sure you've encountered that at some point. When we get that low buzz, it means there's not enough support for the note. Now, support comes from 3 main places. Our airstream, and I'm going to talk about that next. Our embouchure, which is our mouth muscles, but also the reed itself. So for sure, I would say 80% of people I see who are first encountering trouble in the high notes, when they switch to a stronger reed that offers more resistance, they do find it to be easier. So I definitely want you to check that out. The second most common challenge people have with high notes, again related to support, is that they simply don't know how to use their air properly. Low notes, you can pretty well play with a wimpy airstream and you're going to sound okay. The high notes really do require that you're using great airspeed. So what I want you to imagine is that if you could see the air coming out of your mouth the way we see water coming out of a hose, we have a built-in spray valve adjuster. And what you want on clarinet is to turn that spray valve to the smallest, fastest power wash setting possible. It makes a huge difference to our tone. And the main reason is because it lets the reed vibrate. The reed vibrates when we hit it with air molecules. And we want the fastest airstream possible. Wimpy air means the reed doesn't vibrate so well, and then high notes aren't going to work. So I'm going to imagine going fast, fast air. I'm going to play some high notes for you with kind of wimpy air, and what you'll hear is an airy, fuzzy tone, and you'll hear that some of the notes don't want to work. And then I'm going to increase my air speed. Now, I'm not necessarily talking about louder. It's not more air. It's taking the air that we're using and just directing it faster. So here's me with kind of medium slow air. Sounds okay in the low register, although it's a little bit fuzzy sounding. Here's what happens when I take that medium wimpy air higher. Again, I get the undertone, I get a lot of fuzz, a lot of hiss, and it feels like the notes just don't want to come out. It's very frustrating for me as a player because I'm blowing, I'm working, but they're just not coming out. Now, if I simply take that wimpy air and speed it up, listen to what happens. Now, you will perceive that as getting louder as well, but really the key there is that instead of wasting slow, mushy air through the instrument, I'm now activating the reed much better. Faster air is absolutely one of the foundations of playing clarinet well. You'll notice the results in the high register because it's more sensitive, but it's going to help your low register too if you can train yourself to play with that fast air. I have a lot of other videos here on YouTube that are really related to air support, and I encourage you to check those out if this is an area you want to train your body to do more easily and more naturally. It's going to make your clarinet playing a lot easier. All right, now the third most common problem people have that interferes with high notes coming out easily has to do with our natural human instinct to react to tough things, and that's to say, I'm going to do it. So what that might look like is we're playing along and we get to one of those high notes, and it's almost like you can hear the red alert going off. Root, root, here comes the hard stuff. And our reaction is to bear down, to be determined. Where that tension interferes with the note is it's very common for our jaw to tighten, to clench, to bite. If we do that on the reed, chunk, we put a lot of artificial tension on the reed, and biting the reed a little bit inhibits the vibration so that we don't get as much sound. Biting the reed a bit more causes a horrible squeak, and as a clarinetist, I've had lots of horrible squeaks. I'm sure you have too. Big common cause is that we're biting on the reed. And if you bite even more, you'll close the reed shut. No air can go through, and you'll have this experience of blowing hard and hitting a brick wall. Nothing will go through there. Now the vicious circle here is if we're biting a little bit, it will feel hard, and then we tend to be more determined. And we bite more, and it gets worse. So it might be something like this. And at the end, I was biting so much, no sound came out at all. So clues to you to look for that you might be biting. One is that your sound gets softer and wimpier, that it feels really resistant, feels like the air is coming back at you, and that you're getting squeaks. The easiest way to sort of counter that biting, two easy ways. One is to really allow your shoulders to just drop and relax. We want to imagine that we have like a string attached to the back of our neck here that's lifting us up, so we're in great posture for clarinet, but that from that string, our shoulders hang in a very relaxed way. If this is really relaxed, usually our throat's relaxed, so the air comes out easily, and usually our hands are relaxed, and usually our jaw will also be relaxed. So that's one thing you can think of. The second thing is you can really think of the corners of your mouth wrapping in around the mouthpiece like this. If we have a round mouth, it tends to open our jaw up, and it prevents us from biting down. It's also a really good embouchure habit to develop. So we might be looking at it here as a way to prevent a bad habit in squeaking, but you're also creating a really good habit that helps the reed vibrate better and gives you a nice warm, full tone quality. All right, so we've covered 3 of the most common bad habits that interfere with high notes. There's one more that's quite important, and it has to do with our fingers. Now, I do have a few videos here on YouTube really specifically related to how to hold your fingers, and those are great to watch if you're relatively new to the instrument, because you might as well train yourself to have great habits right from the start. In this video, I'm just going to look specifically at common ways that fingering interferes with the high register. One of the most frustrating challenges we have in the high register is that we blow and the note just doesn't come out at all, or it squeaks. So we've talked about biting as a common cause of that. We've talked about that undertone as your reed being soft. This one's a little bit different. This might be some of the high notes work great, or some of the time they work great, and some of the time they don't work at all, or you get a horrible squeak. That's often an indication that somewhere on the instrument you have a hole that's not being covered completely. And that's usually our fingers. So one thing to notice, if you just look at your clarinet, the holes on the right hand here are much bigger than the holes on the left hand. So when you're relatively new to the instrument, it's pretty common for our fingers to not be precise, to not quite cover that hole. We can kind of get away with that in the low register, although it will interfere with the sound, but because the high register is more sensitive, you'll get notes that don't work at all. I'm going to demonstrate that. I'm going to start on a high G, and I'm going to add the fingers to my right hand one by one, and I'm going to deliberately make my bottom finger not quite cover the hole. And what I'll experience is all of a sudden that note's going to feel resistant, like the air is coming back at me, and I want you to hear what it sounds like, and you'll see what happens as I move that finger around. So I'm going to focus in on my right hand here. So you can see I was moving that finger around, and at times when you could tell the finger was off the hole, I was getting a very odd kind of in-between note sound, and then when I slid it over the key properly, for a moment the note was there, and then I moved it again, and it wasn't so good. That hearing me do that might be something you recognize in yourself, or you've had that happen. So it's very common for this to happen on our right hand. Looking at it really helps most people. So I highly recommend that you stand in front of a mirror and simply look at your fingers while you're playing. And when you hit a note that's not working well, do a check. Most of the time you can actually see which finger's leaking, and simply by moving it around, rearranging it, you're going to solve that problem. Of course, our goal is to train our fingers to hit the right spots all the time. And I'll quickly throw out that the best shape for our fingers is rounded and arched. And again, I have other videos I really recommend you watch that talk about that in more detail. The other finger, I guess we can call it a finger, the other digit, your left thumb, is super important to playing high notes, and it's often the troublemaker. So I'm going to spin my clarinet around here. When we're in the high register, our thumb has 2 duties. One is to cover the thumb hole, and the other is to hit that register key. The best habit you can train into your left thumb is that when it's covering the hole for low register notes, you have the edge of your thumb already hitting the register key. That way, when it's time to play it, you just roll like this. See how little I'm moving my thumb? There's low register, low, high. Now what most people do is something like this. Low, maybe high, low, high. And their thumb is moving like crazy, and what tends to happen is as your thumb is sliding up to the high register key, you push it, and then your thumb keeps sliding till there's a big hole open in the bottom, and then it's your thumb that's not sealing the hole. What that often sounds like is low note, high note, no note, or a horrible squeak, sort of like this. There we go. So I deliberately moved my thumb too far off the key. So a very tiny movement would help. You can practice this. It's not so much in a mirror because we often can't see our thumb. Simply hold your clarinet in front of you. So if you're doing what I'm doing now, you'll have this view here. And look at your thumb and just practice going low, high, low, high. And just what you're looking for is little movement, and especially that you're not creating a hole on the bottom. Takes a little bit of practice, but once you get that mastered, really will help the high notes feel easier because your fingers may have been what was throwing you off. A lot of people also, when their thumb moves, move their whole left wrist and hand, and that can cause other problems. You might end up accidentally bumping this key, which pops open a key, and it's very similar to having a finger leak. You suddenly get a squeak and you feel resistant. So when your thumb is moving, you want to train it to move with this part of your hand remaining still. Just your thumb moves. That's hard to do. We like to move our whole hand. Bad habit. So I encourage you to keep your hand still. The other key we sometimes bump by accident is just on the edge of the right hand here. If your right hand is moving and bumping into it. So I recommend with your right hand, you align it more perpendicular to the clarinet, so there's a little space between our right finger and this side key. If you were resting your clarinet on that key, it's kind of a bad habit and you might be pushing it open. That's the common ways that our fingers interfere with high register, and basically it's just not covering the holes completely. So we've talked about a lot of things today. All these are really the barriers to playing high notes easily. The really fun thing about high notes is that if you are blowing with really fast air and your corners of your mouth are in so you're not biting down and your fingers are covering the hole, and you have a reed that's strong enough to support the high notes, they actually do feel easy. And playing a high note should be easy. For you to do is playing an open G, the G with no holes covered, probably the first note you ever played. What I love to do with my students when they're in the studio is I'll have them play open G with great air and great embouchure, and I'll spin the clarinet around so that while they're playing, I'm putting the mouthpiece in your mouth, I move the fingers and see what comes out. And when they're not having the red alarm going off because they think they're playing high notes, they're just keeping their embouchure and air steady, they sound amazing. You can, if you have a friend who plays clarinet, do this with them. It's a really cool exercise, but it's kind of like I'm blowing. If I imagine some random person comes and plays random notes and I keep my air the same, it's easy. So I'll imagine this with my imaginary friend. I'm playing open G. Doesn't matter what they do with their fingers, I just did a random sequence of notes. They all come out. It's really fun. There you go. This is my High Notes 101. I hope it helps you out. And actually, I look forward to hearing from you. In the comments box below, feel free to ask any questions you have. I check them about once a week or so, and I'll add my comments in there for you. And I really hope you enjoy it. Now, as I said, there are a bunch of videos on the Clarinet Mentors YouTube channel that are really designed to help you play clarinet more easily. You can also sign up for my free newsletter. It comes out about every 2 weeks. It always has a video like the one you're watching today, and also my recommendations for other fun clarinet music or gadgets or gear, clarinet news. It's totally free to join. You can sign up for it at www.learnclarinetnow.com. So I invite you to do that, join my community, and thank you so much for watching today's video.